It's very important to understand that your high blood pressure numbers are simply a reflection of your body trying to adapt to you being unhealthy. So as you do the following 10 things that I'm going to show you, research has figured out approximately how much your blood pressure will go down on each of them. And if you do all of them, you can significantly lower your blood pressure by major numbers. We're talking 40 points on the systolic and 10 to 15 points on the diastolic. How much you weigh contributes to your blood pressure in the following ways. Research has shown that for every 2.2 pounds that you're able to lose, your systolic number can go down 1 point. In other words, 1 kilogram for 1 point. Here's where this is important. Losing 2.2 pounds or 1 kilogram doesn't seem like a lot. But when you figure that some people could lose 20 kilograms or 44 pounds, you can significantly lower your blood pressure. The reason why the weight contributes to your high blood pressure is because fatty tissue, the adipose tissue, requires oxygen. And your heart has to work that much harder in order to pump blood to all that extra tissue. If that tissue was shrunken and the blood vessels are no longer needing to supply as much oxygen and nutrients to those fat cells, then your heart doesn't have to work as hard, and as a result, your blood pressure will go down. Now, the million-dollar question is, how do you go about losing weight? There are many philosophies, and I know that you probably have found some that don't work and some that do. So in the comments section, you may want to help others and let them know how you lost weight. For some people, it was changing to a whole food, plant-based diet. Other people, it was a total carnivore diet. For a lot of people, it wasn't either extreme. It was simply eating less calories, less food on the plate. For every time you sit down and eat a normal meal, if you only ate 75% of what you normally would eat, you could lose weight that way, literally by not changing your diet at all. Now, there are carnivore diets, there are keto diets, there are ketovore diets, there's whole food plant-based, there is a zone diet, there is a South Beach diet, there's the Atkins diet. There's a lot of different diets out there. And sometimes it's confusing to figure out which diet should you follow. And the answer is, it almost doesn't matter because every diet has had success. They are actually more similar than they are different when you think about it, because they're all infighting of what the best food is, but all of them agree that you probably should not be eating a lot of ultra-processed foods. The more processed food you eat, the more likely you're putting just chemicals and bad calories into your body. Even a person who eats nothing but steak is still not eating a highly processed food. On the other side of the coin, a person who's only eating plants is also not eating highly processed foods. By losing weight, however you want to do it, is vital, because very often it's not the diet per se that maybe changed your blood pressure. It was simply the weight loss. Salt intake and blood pressure can be controversial, and I'll explain all the details right now. But here's what you need to know in terms of what the research shows you. And that is, if you can reduce the amount of salt that you intake by only 1 gram, you can reduce your blood pressure by 5 millimeters of mercury. Now, the average American eats 3.4 grams of salt per day. The recommended amount is 2.3 grams of salt per day. Now, where this gets confusing is when people start changing their diet and they find out that salt or reducing salt doesn't make that big of a difference. That does happen with some people because they were not eating that much salt to begin with. But if you start to reduce salt, usually what you're doing is you're not reducing the salt in the salt shaker by salting your food. What you're doing is you're reducing the amount of ultra-processed foods that contain salt. So by going on a diet, any diet, and eating more natural foods, you end up reducing salt to begin with, usually to a normal level. Therefore, if you eat natural foods, it's okay to salt your food because it's unlikely that you're getting much salt in the natural foods to begin with. I'm going to give you an example. If you were to start a carnivore diet where you only eat steak, let's just do the extreme version of it. You're only going to eat a ribeye steak once a day. Well, there's not enough salt in that one ribeye to amount to anything. So in that particular case, if you start noticing side effects of following the carnivore diet or an extreme carnivore diet like that, where you are starting to get muscle cramps and you're getting dehydrated and you're getting twitches in your eye and your facial muscles and you're having electrolyte problems, it's okay to salt the steak. And the reason why is because you're simply not going to be consuming 3.4 grams of salt in one meal. But when you eat a highly processed diet, very often there's so much salt in that type of diet that just reducing the salt shaker usually doesn't make much difference. So don't be afraid of consuming salt. Be afraid of consuming an excessive amount of salt. And research has shown that 1 gram of salt reduction reduces your blood pressure by 5 millimeters of mercury. Increasing the amount of potassium, research has shown, can lower your blood pressure. If you can just consume about 5 grams of potassium per day, you will lower your blood pressure by 5 millimeters of mercury. Now, sodium and potassium have kind of this love-hate relationship. When people eat an excessive amount of salt or sodium chloride, and they usually are eating highly processed foods, which have a low amount of potassium. And so in the kidney, this becomes a problem and can affect your kidney, which thus, that's how it affects your blood pressure. So by reducing the amount of salt and increasing the amount of potassium, you can have a 1-2 punch. So if you increase the potassium and lower the amount of salt, you can improve your blood pressure by 10 millimeters of mercury. But if you keep the salt steady and just increase your potassium, you'll only decrease it by 5. Now, how does one start to consume more potassium? There's numerous ways. Just to give you an example, there's the DASH diet, there's the Mediterranean diet, and there's the Zone diet. These diets tend to be very salt restrictive because they don't emphasize processed foods. And the foods that they do allow you to eat, which are vegetables and fruits, tend to have a lot of potassium in them. In addition to that, and I'll put links down below in the description if you want to look at these, there are salt substitutes. So instead of using the salt shaker with sodium chloride, you could use potassium chloride. Now, there is a different taste to potassium chloride, and very often people don't adapt to it, but if you can adapt to it, that would be even better. Now, because of the taste issue, if you cannot stomach the potassium chloride as a salt substitute, you can always get a mix. Now, at the end of the video, if you hang tight, right here at the end of the video, I'll have a video where you click the box, and I did a number of salt substitutes to tell you which ones worked better and how they tasted and everything. So hang tight for that at the end. But nonetheless, you can experiment and get a half sodium chloride, potassium chloride. They sell these. So when you're salting your food, you can't tell the difference between table salt, sodium chloride, and potassium chloride, sodium chloride mix. So it's a wonderful substitute, and it's a great way to get more potassium in your diet. Magnesium can play a major role in controlling our blood pressure. 400 milligrams of magnesium can lower our blood pressure by 1 to 2 millimeters of mercury. That doesn't sound like a lot, but when you combine it with other things that you're changing in your life to lower your blood pressure, it can have a significant effect. And the reason why is because magnesium plays such a major role in many functions of our body, such that if you are deficient in magnesium, it starts to cascade itself into a problem with metabolic issues that can then raise your blood pressure. So for many people, I recommend that they eat a diet full of foods that have magnesium and or take a supplement. And how can you improve the amount of magnesium that you consume? You can simply eat more vegetables during the course of a day, or you can eat fruits that have magnesium, such as an avocado, things like that. There are foods that have not a lot of magnesium unless you purchase the correct type. So if, for example, if you're going to eat meat, you want to get a grass-fed type of animal where the meat came from. That will have more magnesium. Therefore, the animal itself is eating the grass or the vegetable, and that's how you get more magnesium if you're trying to follow a diet where you're restricting the amount of vegetables that you eat for whatever reason. Magnesium supplementation is often necessary simply because organic food and grass-fed meats can be expensive. Many people cannot afford these things, so a supplement can bridge the gap. In addition to that, the soil isn't as strong in some farming communities as it used to be. So even if you are eating vegetables, you may not be getting as much magnesium as you normally think you should. One of the telltale signs of a magnesium deficiency is high blood pressure. So it's worth trying a magnesium supplement for 30 to 60 days to see if you can get enough magnesium. Now, the recommended dose is often lower than what's in a magnesium supplement because you want to take a little bit more so that you can make sure you're absorbing that properly. 1 gram of fish oil taken per day, research has shown can lower your high blood pressure by about 5 millimeters of mercury. Fish oil plays a major role for a number of reasons. First of all, it has omega-3 fatty acids, which will help the blood become thinner. Aspirin and fish oil work in totally different ways. The mechanisms are different, but essentially it does thin your blood in a similar way. This is why if you've ever had surgery, a major surgery, or even a minor surgery for that matter, they want you to stop your aspirin 10 days before the surgery, but they also want you to stop taking any omega-3 fatty acids, because when you have surgery and they cut you open, you need to clot. Clotting is a good thing. Clotting is looked at as bad from a cardiovascular perspective because we never want to have blood clots. We don't want a clot that goes to our brain or our heart, causing a stroke or a heart attack. However, when you have surgery, that's how your skin and the insides heal, is you need to clot. And fish oil can interfere with that when you've had surgery. But unless you're having surgery, you should be taking at minimum 1 gram of fish oil per day. Now there's many different fish oils that I like. I'll just show you this one. This is from Metagenics right here. If you want, I'll put a link down below in the description so if you can look at it if you want to get that one. It's very simple. I take 2 tablets. 2 tablets or soft gels gives me exactly 1 gram of fish oil. Sometimes I'll use the spoon. It's up to you on what you want to do. One of the side benefits, just so you know, of fish oil is that your skin tends to be very healthy. It doesn't become dry. Your hair isn't dry. It's a very oily type of hair. The nails are very good. So these are all side benefits, but ultimately we're talking about blood pressure. And just by taking a fish oil supplement and changing nothing else, you can lower your blood pressure by 5 millimeters of mercury. That sounds like a win to me. What is alcohol's effect on blood pressure? Here's what the research knows, that if you drink no alcohol, or have only 1 glass of red wine, your blood pressure can go down about 4 millimeters of mercury. Anything more than that starts to have a negative effect. And the reason why is because it's possible that the alcohol itself is not healthy for you. We know that. It's a negative when it comes to the liver and the kidneys. And thus, when the liver and kidneys start to go bad, you start to develop an entire metabolic issue where your blood pressure goes up. It may be that it's the other things in the red wine that tends to lower a person's blood pressure. The equivalent alcohol in a shot glass of tequila or vodka does not have the same effect. So many people are confused about alcohol, and I agree that it is confusing because some research says 1 glass a day is acceptable. Other people say 0. Other people say it doesn't matter, like alcohol doesn't make any difference in your overall health. You know, I know people that drink a case of beer every day. These are not healthy people. So it's hard to be convinced that drinking more than a glass of wine would be considered healthy. And I think you know the answer. So if you can refrain from having any alcohol whatsoever, it can only help you. But if you want to drink some alcohol, the research shows red wine is probably the best for you. What is the effect of exercise on high blood pressure? Here's what research has shown. A certain amount of exercise can lower your blood pressure by 5 millimeters of mercury. And the amount of exercise is 150 minutes of cardiovascular exercise per week. This means that if you walk for 30 minutes 5 times a week, that is perfect. Or if you want to ride a bicycle at about 5 to 9 miles per hour for 150 minutes per week, that's perfect as well. The exercise does work better if you divide it up. So it's not enough to go and ride your bicycle 150 minutes and say, I'm done for the week. It's best to do it a little bit each day. Now, the research also shows that high intensity interval training might be a little bit better than cardiovascular training under certain circumstances. And those circumstances are, the person has to be healthy to begin with to do high intensity training. Your heart has to be strong enough and you have to be healthy enough to withstand the high intensity training. So for many people trying to start their health journey by trying to get in shape and lower their blood pressure, it probably would be wise to start out with cardiovascular exercise at a low intensity. Build yourself up so that you can do 150 minutes per week. And then once you're at that level, you can then start incorporating high intensity interval training. So I'm going to give you an example. And there's one other type of exercise I'm going to tell you about that lowers blood pressure. And it's a lot easier than all of these. But here's the thing that you need to know. When it comes to, for example, walking 150 minutes per week, the improvements might be here, like this. When you start running and doing high intensity, more high intense exercise, the improvements might be like this. So there, you get that much margin. The problem with running is it's so hard on some people's knees and hips and feet and spine, and there's so many injuries that I see from running that you just don't get with the walking. So if you're new to this, I would suggest just start walking. There's no pressure to start running. Same thing with cycling. If you want to ride a bicycle and ride a bicycle for a low intensity at 5 to 9 miles per hour, that's great for your heart. Riding a bike 25 miles per hour, sure, it's a harder exercise, but there's a lot of consequences if something goes wrong. Crashing at 9 miles per hour is a lot different than crashing at 25 miles per hour. You can trust me on that one. There's another type of exercise that is very useful and has been shown to be very effective at lowering your blood pressure. And this is great for people that cannot do cardiovascular exercise or they cannot do any type of high intensity interval training. And it's called isometric training. And what this means is you can take, for example, a tennis ball and squeeze it. You can do wall sits, which I'm going to show you right now exactly how that's done. So you can see right now I just go up against a wall and it's as if I'm sitting in a chair, but I'm not sitting in the chair. I'm just leaning up against the wall and using my thigh muscles. Isometric means that your muscles are contracting without any movement at all. There's planks, there's lots of different isometric exercises that can be done. However, you have to do what's fun. And so for many people, going for walks, riding a bicycle tends to be more fun than isometric training. But you figure out what you like to do, and that's the thing that you'll probably stick with. And if you stick with it, the research shows you can lower your blood pressure. Meditation, deep breathing. What is the effect on your blood pressure? The answer is, if you can do meditation or some type of deep breathing exercises once per day, research has shown it has the potential to lower your blood pressure by 5 millimeters of mercury. Now, there's tremendous amount of research for this. You can just Google it and read about it. It's very fascinating that even with all the diets and the exercise, very often just taking 30 slow, deep breaths or finding a way once a day to take a break, relax, not think about all your problems, and just breathe. Now, there are certain things that can improve your breathing such that you will lower your blood pressure even more. And I'm going to tell you about those in just a minute. But sometimes I think to myself, I wonder if it's just the fact that you took 5 minutes off from worrying about every problem that exists in the world and just being conscious and aware of where you are right now. So what I like to do is I like to either lie down or sit down in a comfortable position, and what you can do is breathe in through your nose. Now, this is very important because if you breathe in through your nose, research has shown that your body will produce more of a gas inside the arteries called nitric oxide. And when your body produces more nitric oxide, it allows the arteries to become more pliable, and they will expand with every heartbeat. Thus, the systolic number in particular will go down. Of all the things that you can do that can lower blood pressure, the systolic number is the most variable based on stress. So let's say a person has blood pressure of 120/80 and you give them a lot of stress that day. Their systolic will go up, sometimes significantly, up to 40 points based on stress. Their diastolic might follow a little bit, but not go up as high. So if you're having a problem with the systolic number in particular, for many people, it can be related to stress. So taking just 5 minutes off per day and breathing in through the nose can do that. When you inhale, there's diaphragmatic breathing, there's chest breathing, there's combinations of both. I personally have found that when you inhale through the nose, you don't worry so much about whether your chest is moving or your belly's moving. You just try to fill up the lungs as much as you possibly can. So it's as deep of a breath as you possibly can. What this does is it stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is that part of your central nervous system that allows for relaxation and better digestion. So if you're also having digestive troubles, in addition to high blood pressure problems, very often some form of meditation, a calming time that you do every day where you breathe in through the nose, you can breathe out through the mouth or the nose if you like, that's fine, can have significant improvements. The last thing that you should know about breathing is research has also found that humming tends to vibrate our nasal passageways and the roof of our mouth such that it also improves more nitric oxide production. So, things like that. I know it sounds really weird, and I know for many people it sounds new age and different, and it doesn't sound like you, but if you try it for 30 days, it's something you can do for free, and it doesn't seem to cause any ill problems with your body. You could literally take your blood pressure before you do the breathing, and then after you take the breathing, and tell me what happens in the comments section when you try it. It takes about 5 minutes or approximately 30 cycles of breathing. How much does our attitude cause high blood pressure? Well, no one's really studied it, but they have studied stress reduction strategies, and it amounts to about 5 millimeters per mercury. So in other words, if you go and start to reduce your stress, you can reduce your blood pressure by about 5 millimeters of mercury. But something I've often thought of is certain people tend to be stress cases and certain people tend to not be. I used to be stressed. I think I've solved it. I'm not sure if it's really worked that well most of the time. But what I've found is that as I've lived my life, I've started to realize that attitude sometimes is everything. And having a bad attitude and being negative all the time and looking for the negative and watching the news seems to just, for me, it just pisses me off. And a lot of times you just need an attitude adjustment. I have found that the book by Dale Carnegie called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living is a fantastic book to read. It was written, I think, 85 years ago, but a lot of the principles are still valid today. Now, I have to warn you, if you do read that book, you cannot get offended because you have to understand the dude wrote the book 85 years ago. There's a lot of offensive things that people think is offensive today by today's standards, but that's the way they did it back then. But it's still nonetheless a great book to read because it teaches you how to have an attitude about things in your life that if you just change the way you view things, very often you don't seem to stress over everything anymore. And I gotta tell you, it's a wonderful way to live, to not have as much stress as everyone else. Now, one can argue that you're putting your head in the sand, that you're not current with things. But what value is it to be current and have high blood pressure? It's not of any value. They say that stress reduction reduces your blood pressure by about 5 millimeters of mercury. I would venture to guess that it's probably more, but there's only one person that matters, and that's you. So you can read the book, try stuff out. Worst case scenario, if you want to go back to your old stressed ways, go back. I'll put the link to the book down in the description with everything else that I've used to lower my own blood pressure. There are some high-powered foods, namely beets, spinach, almonds, and there's a number of others that have a high amount of nitrates in them, natural nitrates that can lower our blood pressure. In fact, research has shown that beetroot juice, just 6 ounces of beetroot juice, can lower your blood pressure within 3 hours and last up to 24. It's bloody amazing, the effect of beetroot juice. And for example, spinach and almonds, they also have nitrates in them. And what happens is, and this is a central theme in lowering people's blood pressure, is that anything that you can do that would create more nitric oxide in your body, the better off you're going to be. So for example, breathing can help you develop or stimulate nitric oxide. Certain supplements can help stimulate nitric oxide. But just eating foods that have nitrates in them is supplying the raw materials for your body to create more nitric oxide. So you can breathe in through the nose and hum as much as you want. You need to supply the nutrients so that your body can produce the nitric oxide to lower your blood pressure. Those are the 10 things that I've been doing to lower my personal blood pressure. I probably have missed some, so please in the comment section, if something has worked for you, maybe you can help someone else by making your suggestions. So let us know in the comment section what you have done to lower your own blood pressure so we all can benefit and get healthy.